God today? Yeah, would you stand to your feet as we read scripture today? Jesus speaks to his disciples out of Mark chapter 4, verse 22. And he says this, for whatever is hidden, say hidden, is meant to be disclosed, say disclosed. And whatever is concealed, say concealed, is meant to be brought out into the open, say into the open. If anyone has ears to hear, let them hear. Consider carefully what you hear, he continued. With the measure you use, it will be measured to you and even more. Whoever has will be given more, and whoever does not have, even what they have will be taken from them. He also said, this is what the kingdom of God is like. A man scatters seed on the ground night and day. Whether he sleeps or gets up, the seed sprouts and grows, and though he does not know how, all by itself, the soil produces grain. First the stalk, and then the head, then the full kernel in the head. As soon as the grain is ripe, he puts the sickle to it, because the harvest has come. Can we give Jesus a big shout of praise for that incredible passage? Really encouraging text. Grab your seat, high five someone next to you. Tell them, hey, you're in for an incredible Sunday. Well, today is Building Our Future Sunday. If you're visiting with us today, you need to know that it's a very sacred and significant day in the life of our church. And if you've never been part of Building Our Future before, maybe you've been checking us out online and this is your first time dialing in and you haven't been part of the journey the last month, or maybe you're visiting with us today, you need to know that Building Our Future is the one Sunday a year we set aside across all our campuses where we collectively sow financially, generously, and sacrificially into the future of our church, because everybody here needs to understand and have a revelation that we are not here today because some fairy godmother waved her magic wand and bang, suddenly, ta-da, there was an awesome building, and that you can now suddenly watch online with great high-definition cameras bringing the gospel to your living room. And it didn't just happen by accident. How many of you know that everything that we're experiencing today is because people sowed in the past? So we can have that as our reality today. And it would be completely hubris of us today to assume that we're somehow entitled to all of this because of some random cosmic awesomeness and our good fortune that we're all here today and we're entitled to all of this. We are not. How many of you know that today we're simply standing on the floor that was the previous generation's ceiling that they paid for sacrificially to build? Amen? Here in the passage we read in Mark chapter 4, Jesus teaches a very rich revelation. It's a deep theological premise, that would have really challenged the immature hearer at the time. How many of you know that Jesus used to say things that annoyed people, made them feel uncomfortable, shook them out of their religiosity, shook them out of their sense of self-centeredness? And he's teaching about things that are hidden. And he says these hidden things will one day be disclosed or uncovered. The things that are concealed will one day be revealed. And then he uses the metaphor about the man that scatters seed, and over time there is a crop that grows with which he takes a sickle to and to harvest. And this is really the message that Jesus was trying to get across in Mark chapter 4. He's simply saying that the future will reveal everything that about our present choices. It's sobering to note that Jesus says the days to come will bear the fruit of the decisions that we make today. The years ahead will reveal the effects of the choices we make now. And so today, for the next few minutes on Building Our Future Sunday, I want you to fix your mind on this thought. What will time reveal? What will time reveal? There's something very sobering about time, isn't there? Time is this construct of the measure of the continuum of our lives, measured in decades, years, months, hours, minutes, seconds. You all just got older the last 20 seconds or so. Time is this measure of the continuum of our lives that we cannot have back. We can only live in time moving forward. So no matter whether you're rich, you're poor, you're opinionated, not very opinionated, whether you're red, yellow, black, white, purple if you're a Fremantle Docker, we all know this. Every single living, breathing human being lives under the framework of time. Only God himself lives outside of time. And my question to us is this, especially around Building Our Future Sundays, where we think about the future, we think about the past, we think about the present, is simply this: what will time reveal about us? What will time reveal about us? People say time reveals all things. I'm not sure if I want to make an absolute statement like that, but this we can be sure that what we do now, time will reveal. On days like Building Our Future, I want to pose a question that I pose to myself at this time of the year. What will time reveal about me? What will time reveal at the end of my life across the passage of time? Will it reveal the choices that I've made, the decisions I came to, the priorities I had? It will. What will time reveal about what we did or didn't sow into, what we did or didn't expend our lives doing? For this is what I know about what time reveals. It rarely reveals or speaks about temporal things, but this I know. Time will reveal the things that last, things that remain. It is not an accident that biblical truth was often conveyed in conversations in the Bible using agricultural metaphors. Seed and soil and sprouting and fruiting and pruning and harvest. And Jesus would use this. He was a carpenter, and yet he used agricultural metaphors because people in the first century understood, they thought that way. They understood farming analogies. Well, not so for us city folk, and for those of you that are watching from cities, we don't think like that very often. But Jesus knew that this was a very proper and correct and powerful thing to bring word pictures to spiritual truth. And here in Mark chapter 4, he talks about a man who sows seed into the ground. Seed was an important symbol in the Bible. It was used to convey a lot of truth. And you need to understand what seed represented to the early hearers. Seed has always represented something valuable, something precious. I have here in my pocket in a little glass case a little mustard seed that was gifted to me by a friend. His name is Gary Morgan. He's a prophet and good personal friend of mine, and he gave this to me as a gift, something to encourage me. And he's written on this little glass case here, faith is like a mustard seed, out of Matthew chapter 17, verse 20. It's obviously biblical, and seed in the Bible has always represented something valuable, something precious. And so basic hermeneutics, which is the biblical interpretation, the skill of biblical interpretation, what basic hermeneutics would do is to equate seed with money or something of great value, which is all true and very powerful. But the nuance of the seed in Scripture is actually deeper. What seed represents, whenever the early hearers would hear that word seed, is that seed always represented choice. Seed, more than representing financial things or things that were valuable, seed always represented choice. Why are our finances valuable to us? Because it is valuable to us because it represents choice. Our money, our choice on what we do with it. Seed is seed, and for as long as it is in our bank accounts, it remains as seed. What we do with it, what it becomes, that's our choice. Hello, come on. That's why Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians 9 verse 10, now he who supplies seed to the sower and therefore bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. Paul refers that he, being God, supplies seed to the sower, therefore he supplies bread for food. And here is the choice. God supplies everything to us in seed form. If you're here today, you have an able body, an able brain to be able to earn an income. That is the seed that God supplies for you. Maybe you can't earn yourself an income. Maybe someone helped you to fill out some forms and you've got some government benefit. Whatever it is, if you've got income of any kind, you have seed. And if you have seed, you have choice. Paul says God gives us seed. And with this seed, he gives us choice, either to turn that seed into two things, bread for food or a future harvest. Catch this, we get to decide whether we turn seed into bread for food or future harvest. The choice we make around our seed, only time will reveal it. Only time will reveal whether we've turned our seed into kicks and clothes that will one day turn out or be put into the salvos bin anyway. For those of you watching online in other parts of the world, the salvos bin is this thing that Australians do that we send our secondhand clothes to. It's a long story. Time will tell whether we've turned seed into things that don't last or go beyond the test of time, or it's turned into things that have eternal value. Seed is choice. Here, Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 9 tells us that the seed can be turned into bread which can be eaten for food, or it can be turned into a future harvest. Makes sense to you? If you were to turn your seed into bread, I can tell you now, over the course of the next 24 hours, the passage of time, your toilet will reveal that you've turned your seed into bread. Hello. Usually after your morning coffee and before you brush your teeth. Just joking. But here's the thing, time will reveal whether you've sowed now into a harvest of eternal fruit, fruit that lasts, fruit that remains, fruit that is legacy, a harvest or a crop with your name on it. And for as long as I have seed, I have choice. Turn to someone and say, for as long as I have seed, I have choice. Tell the other person you rejected and say, for as long as you have seed, you have choice. Maybe now it makes sense why the psalmist in Psalm 126 writes his beautiful, through poetic language, writes his beautiful ode to sowing when he says this in Psalm 126 verse 5, again using agricultural analogy. He says, those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy. What is that? That's very, arty, and that's a lot of words. Those who go out weeping, carrying seed to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying their sheaves, their harvest with them. Okay, let's apply some hermeneutics to this passage. Again, ancient Middle Eastern cultures were primarily agricultural. So much of life as they know it finds its framework of understanding from what the land and what nature provides. So English translations used the word seed and grain in terms of imagery as the original. That's the same thing in the original text. That's why Jesus says in John 12, verse 24, unless a grain of corn falls into the ground and dies, it remains as a single seed. Same thing. And the English translators saw it as the same thing. So grain farmers in biblical times would reap a harvest or a crop of grain or seed, whether it was barley or corn or wheat or whatever. And they would then have the first level of choice. They've reaped the harvest, so they've got this seed, this grain. They then get to decide what they do with what they've just harvested. Then they would put a percentage aside for the grain offering at the temple. Then they would put another percentage for the tithe. And they'll put a percentage of their grain to be given to the poor. Then another percentage to be processed for eating and for sale. But then they would keep a certain percentage also in barrels and its seed form. And they would put it in the storehouse or in the shed. And that's where that first level of choice comes with their seed. But then as the year would go on and the winters would grow long, food would become scarce in the pantry. They are then faced with a second level of choice, what to do with the seed, because as money would run out and food would run out and the cries of their hungry children in their ears, they're now faced with a decision. Do we now go into the storehouse and access the seed that we've set aside for sowing and turn it into bread for eating now? Or do we stick with our convictions to sow? You following me so far? Hence the imagery of farmers taking handfuls of that seed that they've stored and sticking with their convictions and sowing in tears, knowing that they could so easily eat it for now. But they know that if they were to turn the seed to bread, seed that was meant for sowing, there would be no future harvest. And so the psalmist writes, those who sow in tears will return with sheaves on their shoulders in joy. The Bible reminds us that only those who sow with tears will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with him. My question today is that what will the passage of time reveal in the future about the choices we make today, no matter how hard they are? Come on, any resounding amen from you? When we talk about building our future, some of you are wondering, what does any of this have anything to do with our financial sowing? Well, everything. Everything you see here in June 2022, time has revealed what people in June 2004 decided to do with their seed. We're here today because of the sacrifices of the many in the past, some of whom have already gone to be with the Lord. You know, being great today is something so many of us aspire to be. Success today is something we all want to achieve. It's the recognition in our time, in our day, to enjoy fame, to be significant now for ourselves. That's all part of being human, and that's all okay. But I want to suggest to you today that the greatest life you could ever live is to ensure that the people that are coming after you will do better, go further, run faster than you've ever done before. That's how us parents think. I live to lead a church into its best days that will be realized long after you guys tap Chrissy and I on the shoulder and say, hey, PK, you're now too old. Your jokes are too lame. We want someone younger, better, smarter, more talented than you to lead us. And that time comes for all of us. And when that time comes for us, my prayer for us is that we're going to leave behind a church that's going to see the lost found, disciples made, nations reached long after we drive off into the sunset with our box of Cadbury roses and a farewell, see you later PK card. It's okay to want to be significant now for ourselves. It's okay to want to do great things for ourselves. It's okay to want to realize our full potential as people for ourselves. Absolutely. But it takes a next level of thinking in a kingdom way to decide that all my life is really just a seed. And I get to choose today what I get to do with it. Come on. I get to choose today what it becomes into the future. I get to choose today as a parent what my life is being expanded into so my kids can go further, can run harder, can do more than I can do. Come on, are you out there? You know, the book of Joshua accounts for the life of Joshua, the leader who led the Israelites, and it accounted for some of the most spectacular acts of conquest and battles than any other book in the Bible, maybe barring 1 and 2 Samuel that accounted for the life of David. But I reckon the life of Joshua has the edge in terms of like counting the number of victories, counting the number of incredible exploits, counting the number of things that one man under one man's leadership did. If you want to talk about a book about success, a book about great courage, a book about how people fulfill the full call of God for their life, the book of Joshua is going to inspire you. And the end of Joshua's life is recorded in the book of Judges. Judges chapter 2 verse 8 says this: Joshua, son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died at the age of 110. That is a long life. Hello. And they buried him in the land of his inheritance at Timnath-Heres in the hill country of Ephraim, north of Mount Gaash. So at the end of Joshua's life, you would have expected that his eulogy or the things they said about his life beyond his death would have read like, Joshua's life led behind an incredible generation of new leaders that honored God, that built places of worship, that declared the mighty works of God from one generation to the next, like they said in the Psalms. And Joshua lived, sowing his life into all that the nation of Israel could be beyond his lifetime. We didn't expect that. If you just read the book of Joshua on its own, that would be the kind of ode that would have been paid towards Joshua's life. And yet the book of Judges chapter 2 verse 10, which is the verse straight after they said they buried Joshua, said this: after that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel. Think about that for a moment. Joshua, the most significant leader at the time, and all of his incredible captains, out of all the exploits they did, all the battles they won, it was all forgotten after one generation. When people ask PK, what do you go on about building our future every year? It's like, oh my gosh, building our future. Because I know that maybe, just maybe, our faith is only one generation away from extinction. I know maybe, just maybe, that what God has been doing throughout the history of the church, not just our church, is only ever one generation away from people that decide, I don't want to do the right thing by my seed anymore. I want to turn my seed to bread. I'm in this for me. Come on, are you out there? But we don't want to be that. Never before has the enemy been so keen on taking out the next generation, shaping their thinking, veering them away from the things of God, making them question things that had been incredible revelations of truth for generations passed down to him. And you know what? The enemy, he just hasn't found a new trick. He's been doing this for centuries, wanting to take out the next generation. Every time we come around seasons of building our future, I think about the past, I think about our present, and I think about the days ahead. Every time we come around building our future during the week, I would often walk through the kids' church areas of our campuses and remind myself why we do what we do and the young lives that we're called to steward. So many 20 to 30 plus year olds in the room today were once in those rooms in kids' church and in youth ministries that are now counted amongst us in big church. One day, those young people in that room are going to be counted amongst us in big church. And the enemy has continued to wage war on the next generation. Every time I think about building our future, I think about this passage in 1 Kings chapter 20. I always come back to it because it's such a sobering reminder that the enemy's work is not done, neither can our work be done. 1 Kings chapter 20 accounts for the nation of Israel, God's people, and they were under attack by like an alliance of 32 different kings, plus the king of Aram. Ben-Hadad was an incredible military strategist. He was an evil man, very bloodthirsty killer, ruthless as a king. And he wanted to wipe out the entire nation of Israel. So he managed to summons an alliance of 32 other kings, 32 other tribes from different regions surrounding Israel. And they were ganged up on Israel. It's this incredible prophetic picture of, I want to get into that today. But here is this alliance of 33 different kings. 1 against 33 is not really fair. But they had mustered up their army, and before a single shot of an arrow was fired in anger, it says there's 1 Kings 20 verse 1. Now Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, mustered his entire army, accompanied by 32 kings with their horses and chariots. He went up and besieged Samaria and attacked it. He sent messengers into the city to Ahab, king of Israel, saying this. This is what Ben-Hadad says, your silver and gold are mine, and your best wives and your children are mine. Here is Ben-Hadad. And he sends an emissary, a messenger, and he says to the messenger, I want you to go in to the courts of Ahab, the king of Israel, and I want you to tell him this. I am after 2 things in Israel. I'm after their silver and their gold, and I'm after their best wives and their children. See, this was Ben-Hadad's thinking. Ben-Hadad thought to himself, the best way to wipe out an entire people group is to go after their money and defile it, boil it down, melt it, and turn it into Aramean currency to corrupt the money of Israel, and to go after the best wives and children of Israel. See, notice that Ben-Hadad could have said, but he did not, say to the emissary, I want you to go and tell Ben-Hadad, tell Ahab, I'm here, there's 32 other kings with me, and we're going to wipe you out. So it's in your best interest to send to me your best philosophers, your best artists, your best poets, your best academics, your best philosophers, your best artists, your best academics, your best athletes, your best actors, your best theologians, your best preachers, your best musicians, your best builders, your most forward thinkers. I want you to know he does not. Why isn't he interested in the best of what Israel had now? Because he knew they were going to die after 1 generation. So he says to his emissary, I want you to tell Ben-Hadad, I want Israel's economic future. I'm going to take all their silver and their gold. I'm going to melt it down, defile it, and turn it into Aramean currency. And I want their best wives and children. I'm not interested in the women that cannot bear children anymore. I want the childbearing age women so I can crush their wombs. And I want their brightest children so we can corrupt their thinking. Teach them Aramean culture. Teach them Aramean language. Teach them to worship the pagan gods we worship. You see how the enemy's always gone after the future. He's not interested in your present. So we all try and be living legends right now, but he's already got one eye ahead. Come on, the church needs to have one eye ahead on the future. Come on, are you out there? And on days like building our future, when we think about what the future holds, when we talk about seed, my prayer for us today is that we understand how spiritual this is. If you're here today and you've got a cynical mind, you think, PK is just wanting to raise some money. Please keep your money, rip up your envelope. You're not a part of this. You're not here with it. But if you're here today and you understand how sacred and significant building our future actually is, we invite you to break the jar with us. Because what I know is this, after a period of 18 years, what time has revealed? It's revealed what people back in 2004 did that was sacred and significant. Today we live in the benefit. Come on, are you? What I do know about my first pastors is what they sowed into our family as a migrant family when we first moved in here. Over time, Pastor Jim and Moira, time has revealed all of your sowing. I don't know what time will reveal in the passage of time in the future, because none of us can tell the future. But we get to make a decision on what our seed becomes. What a privilege. If all you're thinking today is that this is just some fundraising drive, keep your money, this is not what it's about. But if you want to participate in the significance of today, then I invite you to build our future with us. Again, I need a resounding amen from you, church. Come on. Because this is what I know. This is what I know. When we think about partnering with Jesus to build the future of his church, and ensure that the gospel is preached years from now when our children are adults, the government's not going to help us do that. Hello? Netflix and Maya and Nike. They're not going to help us do that. All they're interested in is turning our seed into bread. Come on, are you out there? Sign you up to the latest subscription or get you to buy the next thing at the end of the financial year deal that they've got going on. They're not interested in building the future. They're just wanting to turn our seed into bread. But I'm inviting you this year to break the jar with us again. I spoke this message out of Mark chapter 14, verse 3, just a few weeks ago about how this woman, Mary Magdalene, costly jar of spikenard oil in an alabaster jar. She broke it, poured it all over Jesus' head, and it was counted as a legacy for her. It didn't make sense at the time. But today we're still talking about her. Let me invite you to break the jar again and do something that the next generation will talk about in years to come. When I think about, Chrissy and I have been giving for the last 18 years to building our future. And when I think about the many people that have sowed, some of them are going to be with the Lord. And I think about the legacy that we're all living in now. We can't stop today. Amen. Amen.